Okay, good morning. Welcome, everybody. We are ready to get started. It's terrific to see everyone here. Thank you for coming. My name is Dion Zell. I'm the Senior Director for Academic Technology, and this is a very exciting time for anyone who's interested in learning technologies because they're evolving very fast, and they're presenting many new opportunities for higher education. So today, we're here to celebrate some of our very own CSUN faculty and they will actually demonstrate for us how they're using learning technologies to enhance their teaching and learning. So you'll hear from them in a minute, and as you can see, we have a very full program. You should be able to see that in front of you. But first, I'd like to turn it over to our president, who's going to provide some opening comments. President Harrison, would you like to come up? We are very excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Dion, and good morning and welcome, everybody. And I'm very pleased to be here with you this morning for the Course Redesign Showcase. I'm going to stay and watch all of the demonstrations, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you all have done. I think what you will see, I have a little preview earlier, but I think what you will see represents pretty good evidence that there is a shift taking place. Faculty are embracing learning technologies with great enthusiasm, even those who are taking their plunge for the first time. I think Dion and Hillary told me that the numbers of faculty who signed up for the summer programs had doubled from what it was in the past, which is, again, that's a good problem to have, I think. I think hopefully, the results will be that our students will be the beneficiaries of all of this, that they will be more engaged in their learning, and that we will be able to talk about providing education anytime, anywhere, at the convenience, hopefully, of our students, whose sometimes schedules don't always match. This is what I hear. Why can't you schedule the courses around my work schedule? Yes, that's important for many of our students who do work. However, I like to respond to that by saying your class schedule should come first and your work schedule should be around your classes. And it doesn't always work that way, I get that. But that shouldn't be the starting point. I think for student schedules, it changes their ideas about what courses they're going to take, about what majors they're going to enroll in. And so we need to work with our students to kind of change that philosophy. First priority is education, and second, certainly, work when you have to. Many of us worked throughout our education, and I know scheduling can be a real hassle. But it can be done, and we can help. Today, you're going to see a focus on two different initiatives. First, the Course Redesign, led by Hillary Kaplowitz, and eText, led by Paul Wilson. First is the Course Redesign Showcase. You'll hear from faculty who spent 2 weeks this summer working together with the Faculty Technology Center to infuse technology into their courses, making them either hybrid or online, or web enhanced. So there's many different options. In the eText showcase, you'll hear from faculty who are truly, I think, breaking new ground by producing digital textbooks that will be both lowering costs and engaging to students. They may also be readable on iPads or other tablets, we hope, further enhancing the learning experience for our students. The faculty who participated in these initiatives were selected from a very large group of applicants, cutting across most all of the disciplines on campus. Today, you're going to see just a few examples because we don't have enough time for everybody. There were so many. The main point is this: technologies are here. They're not going away. They're now, I believe, more user-friendly, enough for any of us to use. And we have experts on campus, from Dion and Hillary and all of their staff, to help us when you need the help to move forward. So now it is my pleasure to turn the program over to Bob Greases from Philosophy, who I understand played a unique bridging role. That's where I got that, Bob, in these two initiatives, and he's going to serve as the Master of Ceremonies. So thank you for coming. We're looking forward to this.
Thank you. Good evening, good morning, ladies, gentlemen, and administrators. I'm Rob Gresses from the Department of Philosophy, and you're probably wondering, who is this high-tech Abraham Lincoln? I represent the past, I teach philosophy, and the future. I have gizmos. That's where my notes are. So I was selected for this honor, and I do find it to be an honor, because I was part of both the Course Redesign Initiative and the eText Initiative. I was also desperate for attention, and remain so. I'm up for tenure this year, so if you like it, you know. Now, I didn't just participate in these initiatives. They left an indelible impression on me. The Redesign Institute, in particular, left an indelible impression on me. In fact, I remember it like it was yesterday.
This was a fantastic opportunity. I really enjoyed the pedagogy and talking with my peers and my colleagues about different ways to evaluate online courses and different ways that we teach. And I didn't expect that I would feel as confident as I do in my knowledge and myself and my abilities. And the Redesign Institute did that for me.
Online and hybrid teaching is a different species from face-to-face. With our institute, we teach faculty things like picking the right technology tools, finding ways through activities to promote engagement, using assessment so that they can find out how they're doing on an ongoing basis, making sure that everything is accessible, using universal design principles.
So one of the most useful tools that we learned about was COLD, Quality Online Learning and Teaching. That was a tool to help understand how to design a course. And I found that really useful because though I had had training, it put it all together in a very concise way.
DIY video stands for do-it-yourself video. And what that is simply using the technology you have that's readily available to you to capture video.
I actually got excited about assessment. I really understood how you assess an online class. It was terrific.
I learned about the SLOs, and I think that using the verbs really brought home how even after all of these years of teaching, I can add to what I have been doing, tweak it.
I also really like the idea of putting videos in each little module that kind of guides students visually through what they're going to be doing.
And I've been teaching online for 10 years, but this really just re-inspired me to teach online.
I learned so much about Moodle 2, about course redesign, about online pedagogy. It was the best experience I've had at CSUN in my 6 years working here.
So all the recipes for, a top quality course, we felt that if we could illustrate what these looked like, our faculty would walk away after 2 weeks ready with everything they needed to get to work designing their online or hybrid courses.
Well, as you no doubt surmised from that video, the CSUN Redesign Institute, we called it Designy, was a 2-week seminar aiming to help faculty transform their courses from face-to-face ones to online, hybrid, or web-enhanced versions of those courses. It did that by demonstrating to us the latest technologies, showing us how to use them for maximum pedagogical effect, and immersing each of us in a community of like-minded faculty who are enthusiastic to learn more about teaching and pedagogy. Would those enthusiastic participants in the Redesign Institute please stand up? You can consult your programs to see who they are. Please give applause to these champions of teaching. Okay, it's time to get to some presentations. One note, we're going to have questions and answers at the end, so please keep your questions till then. Our first presenter is Virginia Wynn of the Department of Child and Adolescent Development.
Hi, everyone. So I chose to redesign CADV 352, which is a upper division required course. And my department chair and I thought that this would be a really great way to offer a course that's that's hard to get into by providing it online. So when I thought about an online course, two priorities came up. I really wanted to develop a sense of community, and then I really wanted to be able to scaffold student success, because what we learn about online classes is that often kids or students get lost and they don't really know how to successfully navigate the course. So the first thing I did, well, this is just a broad view of the website that I developed. And one way to focus on developing a sense of community is I created an intro video. So this was just, I think, 2 or 3 minutes where I introduced students to my course, what are the main goals, and for them to see my face and hear my voice. And then I asked them to like us on Facebook. So my department website, or my department has a Facebook page, which I'll show you next, where it just shows the sense of community that we have. And currently we have almost 500 likes, which I'm really proud of. And then lastly, I created a glossary, which is a really neat toolkit where I ask students to post a picture of themselves, their contact information, and just to share something fun, so what makes them happy. So I, for example, shared that I like deals, so I share some deal sites. And so really, anytime you refresh the page, anytime you sign on to Moodle, a new person pops up, which is really cool. So here's an example of the front page of our Facebook page, which I didn't create, but I just like to link to because it just shows how our department really has a sense of community. So another priority was really scaffolding student success. So this is just a web page that I made through Moodle, and I say that, to be successful in this class, there's some things to keep in mind, such as, make sure you understand the course requirements, keep up with activities, and then also to read effectively, because a big part of online classes, I think, is keeping up with the reading. And so what I did was I created a video where I took pictures of our textbook, and I said, here are some tips to navigate our textbook. And then I made a separate page specifically about the textbook, and I said, there's a physical textbook, there's an e-textbook, but also if you're not sure how to navigate an e-textbook, I linked it to a video that was made by by Faculty Technology, where it shows students how to use an e-textbook, how to highlight and things like that, which I think is really great. Another way to scaffold student success is I have a little help page. So if you have questions about Moodle, go here. If you have questions about technology, go here. And then I also created a forum called Questions and Answers Forum, where if they have questions about the class, they would post, and I would respond within 24 hours. And then if there are personal questions, I give them my email. My email is everywhere, front page here, on the syllabus, etc. So to really create this website, this Moodle page, within Moodle, I used the page feature, where it's just a link to another part of Moodle. I used the glossary feature to create this roster that I talked about, where every time you update or sign into Moodle, there's a new student being featured. And I also used the forum to create the questions and answers portion that I talked about. And then outside of Moodle, I learned to take a video of myself and then post it on YouTube, thanks to Melissa. And then the camera, which you can use with your iPhone or smartphone, iPad, or computer. And so those are the tools I use to create some of the most exciting parts of my website. Thank you.
So as you could see, Virginia's course included elements of support, her support for her students' support for each other. And even though it was fully online, she was here in MeetSpace telling us about it. Our next presenter, though, has literally transformed herself into a digital projection. Her name is Ana Sanchez-Munoz from the Department of Chicano-Chicana Studies and Linguistics. Without further ado, the digital ghost of Ana Sanchez-Munoz.
Hello, my name is Ana Sanchez-Munoz. I am a professor in Chicano-Chicano Studies and Linguistics. The course that I redesigned is Chicano Studies 433, Language Acquisition in Chicanas, Chicanos, and other ESL speakers. Some of the things that I did for this class was, number one, clean up the course. I used to have a lot of text, a lot of information right on the homepage, and I learned to use pages and labels to convey the information in a more efficient way and in a way that doesn't look too crowded. Week by week, it's important to keep similar layout, so there is a pattern. So as you can see, my week 1, I had 2 modules. You click on the module and you get the information, the topics that will be covered, and then the things the students need to do for that particular module. Another interesting tool was Wordle. With Wordle, you can create funny word collages like this one, so it's a good visual for your students. Those were some of the features that I used to redesign my Chicano Studies 433 class online. I really had a lot of fun creating this class. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ana. Earlier today, Paul very rudely corrected my grammar, one of many occasions that I needed it. Obviously, I need to take Ana's course. But that'll have to wait, as it's time for our next presenter, Sloan Burke of the Department of Health Sciences. So, Sloan.
Thank you, Rob. He went easy on me, didn't he? It could have been a lot more brutal. Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for sharing your valuable time with us. I just wanted to share a few things that on effective online learning activities online. People think, how do you really engage your students online? And is that really possible? You know, when we think about the old school model of online learning and how it was like more correspondence course, right? You get these modules in the mail and you'd fill out things and send them back in. And so how do you really engage your students online? How is that possible? Well, it is. After attending the Redesign Institute, which was so fantastic, I was actually scheduled to redesign a cultural course in the spring. And I got so excited, I redesigned a course that was launching in 2 weeks after the Redesign Institute. I was like, I want to do it now. And I'm just so excited. And Hillary was there with me every step of the way, and Dion, they said, go for it, let's just do it. And so this was a summer course I was teaching, and before you guys think I'm promoting illicit drug use to our students, it is health aspects of drug use, so is the actual course. And so here's kind of a screenshot of some just creative ways, you know, using video medium. I like a lot of photos and things like that. I use photo voice in my research and things, so I like to engage students to do the same. Here you can see, I know, there it is again. I'm glad I gave you guys the preface of that. So this is a screenshot as well of the course, and what I had students do one week was actually to create a VooVox. And a VooVox is a collage of pictures, and you can actually insert video, and I know it sounds complicated in music, but literally, some of the students were like, it took me 10 minutes, Dr. B, and I was so worried because I'm not good with technology. They were like, they weren't worried about the final paper. They weren't worried about the quizzes and exams. They were like, but I'm nervous about this VooVox in the beginning. But I calmed them down, you know, via email and continual announcements, and they got so excited about it, and this was some of the feedback that they received. So that they really enjoyed the activity. You can kind of take a look at some of the quotes. So it really engaged the student, and it created student-created content. So they were a part of the course, and not just sort of always this didactic, you know, sort of seeing the slides, seeing the lectures, but really they were creating some of the content for that week on their chosen drug. Okay, luckily this isn't on sexual health. Okay, we'd be having a lot of fun right now. Okay, even beyond this. Okay, and here's another screenshot, and says it is a fun way you can customize it. So that's actually, I didn't go out and take a picture of a liquor store out in Northridge, but it was actually to create the Health Science 336, if you drink, do so responsibly, to the students. And another way to engage them, I found in teaching online, you know, I've taught online since 1999. I was an early adopter. And so when I came to the Course Redesign Institute, I thought, oh, come on, am I going to learn anything new? No way. I learned so much new. It was so many new things, so many new elements, and it just really inspired and re-engaged my teaching, like I have said over and over again. And, but yeah, one of the things that I found in online learning is people, and even with very complex subjects, I've taught research methods online, qualitative and quantitative, and kind of sending sometimes students out for an experience and then having them come back to discuss that experience seems to be very beneficial and work very well, and even in complex courses. In this discussion, they actually watched an episode of A&E's Intervention, which many of you know is a documentary highlighting people's struggles with addiction, and then their experience with that intervention that highlights it in the show. Students, some of the students were big fans of intervention, but they included, and they were so thoughtful, some of the students had found a show that they had already seen, and they didn't post the same show. And so they summarized that. I gave them 10 guided questions, and they absolutely loved that assignment as well. About quizzes, you know, and exams, I think it's important, again, it's not so much engagement, but to explicitly kind of say, you know, that, because sometimes I think faculty are a little bit nervous that quizzes tend to be something that you can't quite police. Like, are they really doing the work? You know, or is the person really responsible for the information? But I think if you're clear about it in your syllabus, and you have things like randomization of questions, using a question bank, you know, having the student click on, by taking this quiz, I'm agreeing that this work is my own, can be very easy ways that you can ameliorate that. Okay, and it's always good to end on Prozac, right? There's a sample quiz question. Okay, and I think this is just ending with my quote, but again, you know, I've been teaching, and I thought, you know, it's just the Course Redesign Institute, if you have kind of a footing, if you're a hybrid class, or you're just heavy on the Moodle side, even with your face-to-face classes, attending the Course Redesign will really just engage your teaching and really re-inspire it with all this creativity and technology. So thanks, everyone, for your time.
Thank you, Sloan. Can you believe somebody so friendly gives 18 quizzes? She would actually do it during the seminar. I remember getting her a cup of coffee. She said, I passed the test. I said, what test? No, that's, of course, false. She doesn't drink coffee. Okay, our next presentation comes from Sheena Malhotra of the Gender and Women's Studies Department. So, Sheena.
Hi, I'm Sheena Malhotra, and I'm a professor in the Gender and Women's Studies Department. I teach GWS 350, which is Intersections of Gender, Race, Class, and Sexuality. I'm teaching it in a hybrid format, and these are some of the tools that I use. So what I did was redesign my GWS 350 course and change it into a hybrid version. It's going to be about 50% online and 50% in the classroom. I have listed here the week's student learning objectives right at the top, so students know which of the course objectives we're trying to address in that week. And then I list by day of the week what work is due. For example, this week they have to do a forum where they're doing a creative snapshot of themselves, which is really a building block to the autoethnography paper they're going to do later on. But in this assignment, they're going to creatively express their sense of their racial identity and privilege in some creative manner. So students have a selection of free tools that they might be able to use to do different things. For example, Dippity is a tool that allows them to create a timeline. And it could be a timeline of their own racial identity development, for example. So Make Believes Comics is a free tool where they can make a comic strip of their own with drag and drop characters. And again, students could use this to talk about identity development. I have a knowledge survey in my course. So students will rate themselves about their own knowledge of certain concepts in the course. So 1 would mean that they have no knowledge of the concept. 2 would mean that they have some understanding, they may have heard about it, but they can't define it. 3 would mean that they totally understand the concept and can define it and give examples for how it works. And this should serve as a really great pre-test and then post-test instrument for this class. I really enjoyed redesigning the course in a hybrid format because I was able to keep the interactivity with students that I really value, as well as to maximize student learning through all the different tools that Moodle offers.
Thank you, Sheena. Obviously, in Sheena's class, you learn a lot about yourself. If I took it, I suspect I would discover I'm very insecure and overly confessional. Our next speaker, though, is neither of those things. He is Kenneth Luna of the Department of Modern and Classical Languages and Literatures and the Department of Linguistics / TESL, TESL, right?
Thank you. So the class I redesigned was Spanish 401, which is language and culture. So here's a snapshot of my main page, and what I did is I organized all the important documents at the top of the page, clearly labeled, where I organized all my administrative documents, all the discussion fora. For example, they have 2 discussion fora, one for the activities in the class and another one for questions that they may have for the class, so they can post it there and everybody can benefit from the answer. 2 things that I would like to highlight about this and about what I use in Moodle. One thing is conditional activities, which is a really great tool in Moodle too. For example, I make them take a syllabus test, quiz. They can't access anything else on the Moodle page until they take the syllabus quiz and they get 100% on the syllabus quiz. Everything else is locked down, and until they fulfill that requirement, they cannot continue on with the course. So that's a wonderful tool implemented with Moodle too. And I'm also using virtual office hours. So I'm using Elaborate Collaborate to have office hours. And it's a wonderful tool. So another thing related to the course redesign was we talked about integrating different tools into the course. So one thing I did was I made my syllabus into a book in Moodle. They have all the information there, and they have, for example, here there's a table of contents, which they can access all the different parts of the syllabus without having to scroll down through many pages or print something out or download a PDF. So for my lectures, I use SoftChalk, which is a very interesting tool. It's kind of like a crossover between an online delivery, HTML, and an eText. Here I use the, of course, you have the text for the main lecture, pictures, maps, animated GIFs. For example, I have this really cool animated GIF in which we talk, in this portion of the class, we talk about the reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula. So it shows how the Iberian Peninsula was being conquered step by step throughout the times, all the way down until they got to the south of the Iberian Peninsula with an animated GIF that they can access at all times. One really cool thing about SoftChalk, and this is very important for us who teach foreign languages, is that by just the click of a button, you can change the entire interface to be in a different language. So that allows us to give the students an immersion situation, because everything they see is in Spanish, and my entire course, of course, in Spanish. So for example, you have the Spanish abbreviation for table of contents, go back, and here I have the entire copyright mark. And one last thing that I want to mention about this is, like, one thing that Moodle, not Moodle, SoftChalk does is that creates a mobile page. So immediately creates a mobile page, and they can access it from any tablet, any smartphone. So they don't have to be necessarily, going into a full web browser to access all this information. Another thing that this class covers is all the dialect and regional variations in the Spanish-speaking world. So of course, in order to talk about regional variation, we have to talk about accents and all the different things. So what I did was this.
Casa.
So what I did was I recorded all the pronunciations for all the words that I present in class, all the different, we use a lot of phonetic symbols, so sometimes they don't know what the phonetic symbols mean. So I recorded the pronunciation of the phonetic symbol. I recorded all the words depending on the region, according to the pronunciation in that area, so they can access it all time and listen to it 20 billion times. Because one thing that I was running into in the classroom was, of course, they hear me, they take notes, I try to explain to them how they pronounce a certain thing in the mouth, but of course when they go home and they're gonna study, they don't necessarily remember or know what I was doing, and they need me right there. This is something that you can do with I guess, lecture capture, which would be useful, but these are 1-second clips. I mean, this is just 1 second, so they can just keep on clicking on it as many times as they want, and then hear it, and then perfect and remember what the differences are. And then at the end of the activity, of the soft chalk lesson, I always have an activity for them to practice the material in that module. So here's an example of a crossword puzzle that soft chalk creates for you pretty much. I mean, I didn't have to do any coding or anything like that. I just input all the questions with the answers, and then soft chalk does this for you, and it's really great. You can do it as something graded. You can do it as something practiced with unlimited tries, and it doesn't matter. So finally, some takeaway points. The institute was an amazing thing. I learned so much. It was incredible. So of course, it teaches you organizational skills, not only organizational skills for yourself, but how to organize the information in your class and how to present it in the online format, because it's not the same thing as when you do it face-to-face. Also, one big thing for me was the best practices for online design. We learned, when I came to the institute, I said, oh, you put some PowerPoint slides on Moodle and that's it, you made the class online. No, best practices in universal design, that's a big no-no, and there are reasons behind it, and we see why that is important. And related to that is the integration of tools. You want all the tools to be as integrated as possible so students don't have to be going to different areas. We have a lot of tools, but we may feel a little bit overwhelmed and think, oh, I don't know how many tools I can use. A well-thought and designed course will already use a lot of tools in and of itself. So that's not going to be an issue. And then attribution and copyright, I wanted to mention this really quickly because it was really great. All these pictures and all these things that you see, we learn in the Institute how to find Creative Commons and open source and public domain pictures and things so you can put them in your classroom and give proper attribution and copyright and not run into any iffy copyright issues. So that's it for my class.
Thank you, Kenneth. Okay. Well, our next speaker is Tom Kai of the Department of Family and Consumer Sciences. Go ahead, Tom.
Hello, my name is Tom Kai. I am a faculty member in the Department of Family Consumer Sciences. The course I redesigned is called FCS 324, Consumer Rights, Issues, and Challenges. Some people actually use existing website, materials for their classes, but there are some tools that faculty can use to create their own materials for the class. For my class, I use a tool that can let you create your own comic. So here I use material from my case analysis, and I use this tool to create my comics for the student to learn the case analysis in some fun way. This tool will let individuals pick those pictures and put in the right spaces and let people type in the text. By doing that, this is my own content related to the course materials. Moodle has a pretty powerful activity tool. It's called Online Moodle Forum. And we can use that for class discussion and even for online debate. So they have to choose their side by using the tool. It's called a choice. If you click the choice, you have to pick sides. In my online debate, I use Google is monopolist. Well, some may not agree with this. Google is not a monopolist, so students have to choose their sides. So I choose no, Google is not a monopolist. Save my choice. Okay, only after you do this, you can participate in the following class discussion, like, why you think Google is not a monopolist. I've never designed an online course before, so I was not sure if the class will be engaging. But now I'm pretty confident that the class will be very interactive, and I'm looking forward to teaching it.
Thank you, Tom. Earlier today, in fact, we were having a debate about Tom's course. We were debating whether it looks wonderful or great. We were all wrong. It looks fantastic. And speaking of fantastic, our next speaker is fantastic, too. He's David Gray of the Department of Biology. David.
All right, thanks, Rob, I think. So I'm David Gray. I'm an associate dean in science and math some of the time, and a professor in biology some of the time. I teach evolutionary biology, which is a majors required core course, hundreds of students each year. And You heard a minute ago Sloan say she's been teaching online for 10 years or something like that, and an early adopter, she described herself. So I'm not like that. Until a few weeks ago, I didn't have an iPad. I had never used Moodle for anything, and until 4 weeks or so ago, I didn't even own a cell phone. So not an early adopter here. Let's see. So how bad was it? Here's how it used to work. This is what I'm trying to change from. The students had a textbook that they mostly didn't read, and then I'd go into class, I'd talk at them and tell them what was in the textbook that they were supposed to have read, and then they'd take 3 midterms and a final, very standard kind of format, multiple choice, not very interactive, not very higher level kind of stuff. And so, of course, we do assessment in biology. I did this, and biology has 10 questions that they want students that have taken this course to achieve some level of expertise in. I did this summer. My students got 6.2 out of 10 on average. So that's where we're starting from. What I'm trying to get to, I'll be teaching this this coming spring using an iPad classroom. And this will utilize several of these available technologies that you've heard about, not all of them. There is an eText available that works on an iPad, meaning it doesn't require a flash player. It saves the students about $50 versus the regular format text. The iPad in class I used this summer to lecture from, so I got some familiarity with using Explain Everything and some of the softwares to present material using the iPad. And most of the lecture material is going to be online in some kind of format, not me sitting there, yep, putting them to sleep for 15 weeks. So there's various tools that you can use to do that. You can use lecture capture in a standard lecture format, like I think they're doing today, and record the thing in entirety that then is online and students can review that over and over and over again. Or you can use something called personal capture to get a smaller clip and segment that you can use. And with an iPad using Explain Everything, you can record a smaller demo segment of some kind of big idea that you're trying to explain to them, and then they can review that ad infinitum. Most of the in-class time would then be kind of activity-oriented question and problem-solving kind of idea. So it's sort of a flipped model utilizing several of these things. Here's a demo I made of me using this personal capture kind of thing in Explain Everything to explain a really big, complicated idea in simple terms. Here it is.
So if you have some kind of big, scary idea like this, what you can just do with this kind of thing is you can move it around. Ooh, that's scary. You can put it over here like this and explain it just in simple terms, and then you're done.
Now that'll be online. They can watch that over and over and over again, looking for the hidden message if they want to. So.
Can they play backwards?
These people can do anything with technology. I'm sure they could arrange that. So as I taught this summer, I used the lecture capture facilities within the room. It records a screen capture of what's projected from the computer. It records a separate feed of whoever's talking, and students can toggle those on and off and focus on whichever they prefer, and that then becomes a resource that they can use overall. So my reflections on the redesign, obviously I haven't done this yet. This is set for this spring, and we'll get assessment data for comparison. But the first reflection I had was that for the newbie like myself, the problem is not that there's not enough technological support and things to do. The problem is almost that there's too many. There's too many options to choose from when you're trying to go from zero to doing something. And these people have done a great job of sort of pre-filtering more useful kinds of resources. The biggest change for me, though, is it changed what I think of as teaching resources. So I used a textbook, and I kind of thought anything else was sort of cheating. You know, it's like me getting a day off if I have them go watch a video or something like that. And now I don't. You know, link to TED Talks, Nova Talks, people that have nice productions of material that's way better than I could put together and produce anyway. You know, I'm an evolutionary biologist. I'm not a tech person. So With that said, I'm really excited about trying it this spring and seeing what happens with the course and the student experience. I do have reservations about fully online teaching still, which maybe we can discuss if you're interested. But thank you.
Thank you, David. Well, that last line tells me that not only has David's teaching evolved, it's probably still evolving. In fact, I bet the next version will not only be web enhanced, it'll have a vestigial tail. Time will tell. Speaking of time, it is now time for our Q&A. Leading it will be our fearless, amazing leader, Hillary Kaplowitz of the Redesign Institute. If anything happens that wasn't supposed to, it's her fault. All right, Hillary, take it away.
All right. So we're just going to open it up for questions. If anyone has questions for any of our speakers, Virginia had to go teach, so we've lost still here. So just go ahead and raise your hand. We are filming, so we would love it if you spoke into the mic, even if you don't need to. Any questions? Great.
Hi, I think my question is for Kenneth, but I'll take an answer from anybody. I did find out yesterday that the new CSUN app has a way to go into Moodle on your smartphone without a browser. I think that's what I was finding out. And it's fun to have access to Moodle on your smartphone, but what is the advantage of accessing Moodle without a browser? You could use your browser on your smartphone. So I'm just wanting to get that fine point. I missed it.
Well, you will always need a browser to get to the page, whether it is from your smartphone or your computer, but the page is optimized to be displayed in a mobile device. So it's going to load faster. It's optimized for that kind of delivery. And in terms of the new app, it's really cool because, they can also access it from the app. They go into Moodle, they go into the app, they click on that. The page is HTML. That's what it is. So it will load up in a browser window, but it's just going to be mobilely optimized. Mm-hmm. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay. Yeah. Oh no, I was just thinking of what
I was thinking of one clear example off the top of my head is when students come into the library, for example, with assignments, and they might not have a paper syllabus with them anymore. They could go into their phone really quickly and pull up the assignment if they need help with the librarian, or they go to a tutoring center. So that's something I'm thinking that's really helpful about mobile Moodle. That's more practical example, I guess.
Textbooks, yeah.
Any other questions?
My question is for David. Considering that you are not an early adopter, what was the impetus, the trigger point decision when you decided to go online?
Well, honestly, I thought it might save me some time. I was really, really wrong. It turns out to be much more time-consuming to design this kind of thing. I mean, I think once you have it, there's some time savings with that, but it's certainly a huge kind of startup investment of time doing that. So I was disabused of that notion really quickly. But the main thing really is that I've taught this course, over a dozen times, and they're not getting any better at it, and neither am I. So I really just wanted to change the presentation of the material and have it be much more interactive and utilize this technology. That's why.
And I think, too, just to add to that, I think there's sometimes a myth that teaching online, I don't know, there's different camps. Some people think that it's not a lot of work at all. It's easy street. I'm just going to throw up all my lectures and throw up some quizzes. And then others think, oh, my goodness, it's such an arduous amount of work. What am I taking on here? And really, it's almost the way in which the time is invested, like David alluded to, where if it's almost like 80% of it is up front before you even click on to open the course, essentially, to make the course accessible to students, which is somewhat exciting. I mean, in the fact that it's very organized, it's very linear, you're doing that creativity on your own and planning accordingly, and then when it launches, you're kind of what we call the guide on the side, the facilitator. And so there's a difference also in that too, in the workload, and it's interesting to kind of think of.
There's another question over here.
I'm
just wondering about the student interaction. Has it changed for you? I mean, do you end up having more students come to your office hours, fewer students come to your office hours? I mean, how have you reconciled that, you know, not having contact with students if that's the case? I mean, physical, you know, where they come in and talk to you face to face.
That's a great question. It is different. They aren't coming to your office as often in person. But there's ways to still be having the online office hours, like a couple of the presenters spoke of. And even you can have online chat rooms in a designated hour, a certain time of day, and Q&A boards, but there's still that connectivity. You know, and sometimes if you have a program too where you're connecting via, why is it escaping me? Blackboard, Collaborate. You know, then you're actually seeing each other face to face. And I used to run an international internship program with Skype online. And so we were in contact through Brazil, London, and we would be able to have that face to face time still and that connectedness, which is important in teaching, you know.
I would say, for me, it has to be more or less the same. Yesterday, I had a student, log on to Collaborate and ask me a couple of questions through the chat. So they definitely use that. And since you have discussion four questions, I've had a couple, plenty of questions in the discussion forum. But I also give them the chance to come to my physical office hours if they want to. So I provide them the online office hours because the class is online. But if they want to come and see me in person, they can do so.
Well, I haven't done it yet, so I don't really have an answer. But as I mentioned, I do have some reservations about fully online teaching, and that's part of it. I think that we can use all these materials and technology to guide students to resources, but we still have a key role as interpreters and engaging them, and this kind of higher level interaction with the material. That's what to me makes a quality student learning experience. So that's what I don't want to lose by doing this.
And one thing I wanted to mention really quickly, one thing that I was able to do in my online class that I usually can't do in my face-to-face class is that building that sense of community through discussion fora. So the beginning, the first week, they had to introduce themselves. They had to talk about what they wanted to get out of this class. And I encouraged them to talk about something personal if they wanted, talk about something about their life, where they want to be in the future, and they just started talking about, some people uploaded pictures of their children, and people responding, and it just built this sense of community. Like I would say even better than sometimes face-to-face.
Yeah, and a great dynamic happens because those students that tend to be the wallflowers and not speak up in class, suddenly they have a safe environment to share their thoughts and through discussion forums, or they might be shy about approaching a professor or not going to a professor's office. So yeah, great question.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question.
Oh, it's eText.
This is a goodie. So when I'm teaching using these tools, I will come up against spots where I'm lost. And a student will help me out in class. I'm wondering if you've had those experiences and if you could share any examples.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. I've had a little bit of that. I think testing things as much as you can, as we know, because sometimes even in lectures, we're testing our links right before, the day before, and it doesn't go to the link's not live or for whatever reason. So I think being extra vigilant with that and being open, to students' feedback, and it can get real excited and they say, well, no, I've actually used this program. Even through Vuvox, Hillary and I were playing around, and Hillary's like, well, there's Pixies, there's other collage, actually, pictures and videos too. So I think being open to students' suggestions and you can even create that sort of feel in that environment, that culture online is important. But yeah, there's been little incidences, and we don't put our egos to the side and we say, that's awesome, and sometimes it's a very public forum where we email that idea out to everyone. So thank you, Stephen.
All right, thank you very much. Let's give them a big hand. Everybody in the Redesign Institute did a great job.
Okay, everybody, I'm back. We're going straight into that second showcase. 2 showcases in one day. No showcase showdown, though. So if the first one was looking at the future of courses, this second one is looking at the future of books, namely eTexts. Now, not only was I part of the Course Redesign initiative, I was also part of the eText, and actually remain part, they haven't kicked me out yet, of the eText initiative. It also left an indelible impression on me. Why, I remember it like it was yesterday.
And eText is kind of a combination of what the textbook used to be and what lecture used to be. Faculty have, in the past, written things that were then photocopied usually, and it had all the constraints of photocopy, so it was mainly text and black and white images. But now we have those constraints completely lifted.
Putting it all together into one ebook is a way of eliminating the need for a traditional print textbook. All kinds of material that really brings the subject matter to life in a very real-time way, things that are happening now.
Now, there's sort of a distinction between the content. That's the stuff that you would write on a word processor or you would gather with your camera, and containers. So content versus containers. Right now, we're sort of pushing 3 different containers. One container is iBook's author.
Now with an iBook, you're able to incorporate interactive elements, which then now introduces you to widgets, which is new to me and didn't take that much to learn, but it's a new process which adds interactive elements for the students to access. It makes it a little more interesting than just the traditional page.
I think with the iBook that it really is more than a book. It's a multimedia tool, and you can head out in different directions. You can have your own content, your own photographs, the interactive exercises, and bring it all together in one space so that students can engage in the content in multiple ways.
Another container is soft chalk, and that allows you to put a book kind of up as a web page.
The confocal microscopy eText lets students learn information about the microscope without actually having to be in the room with it. And it really prepares them nicely for when they actually do come in to sit down with the instrument.
And then the third one is just a PDF. But PDFs now are more than you might think they are.
What I did in creating this ebook was I took a series of existing material that I've been using over the past 9 or 10 years teaching this visual communication course and inserted all kinds of access to other internet sources, whether it's websites, blogs, podcasts.
I think technology is changing faster and faster in academics. And so what has to happen is you have to treat all of these things as opportunities that you might want to take and you might want to spend your resources on, and try to embrace what you can that will really impress your students and engage your students and make you an effective teacher for this generation that's really born digital.
Well, as you saw, the eText initiative, that's what it was. It's designed to support CSUN's faculty development of eText for the use on portable electronic devices. Now, we have a cohort of 25 amazing eTexters working on these kinds of projects. So those of you eTexters who are here, please stand up so we can give you a round of applause. Clap, 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 clap. Now, everybody's name is on the program, so you can consult that if you want to see everybody involved. But we're going to start with another presentation. Our first presenter is Amy Kachingwe, spelled vaguely like it sounds. She's from the Department of Physical Therapy, so she'll probably be judging your posture while she's talking. Her book is called The Shoulder. As you'll see, it's a how-to book about how to fix the human body. It's rich with videos displaying physical therapy techniques just for the shoulder. And eventually, she's going to have a big sequel called Your Other Shoulder. Please welcome Amy Kachingwe.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm from the Doctorate in Physical Therapy program here at Cal State Northridge. And traditionally, what I have done in my courses is I teach orthopedics. So I teach the students how to evaluate and treat the different body parts. So the shoulder, the knees, the hips, the cervical spine, the lumbar spine. And what I have traditionally done is the students pick up a course packet, looks something like this, at Sunstar, and costs $40, $50. And inside it, it has pictures of my techniques, some description of the techniques. So I go to lab. I spend 6 hours a week in lab with the students. It's a very hands-on course. The students will sit and come up, and I will demonstrate the techniques. So they'll write down in their booklets, how to do it. and then we will break up, and I'll go around the room, and I have 32 students in my class at a time. I'll go around the room, and I will help them practice the techniques, learn how to do it, etc. So you can see that can be, somewhat of a challenging process at times to be able to get around and make sure they're doing it right and to keep the class moving at a somewhat, good pace. So I was really excited about this whole idea of the iPad initiative. So I want to show you one of the books that I made. So this is basically like an electronic lab manual of how to examine and treat the shoulder. So as you can see in the bottom, there's 4 little dots. So I have 4 chapters in my book. So I just have a copyright at the beginning, make sure the students realize this is my material. I don't want them putting it out and having everybody learn how to be a physical therapy student. And then I have a shoulder anatomy review chapter. I have a shoulder examination, how to examine the shoulder, and then I have a shoulder treatment section. So let's go to one of these chapters. So let's go to the shoulder examination chapter. And if you open this up, so this starts out just with my course objectives, which I know the students always really read. And then I have these widgets built into my book. So these are interactive widgets. So my first one is just an examination form. So the students can click on this and they can scroll and they can remind themselves of what a typical examination of the shoulder would look like. Then I go into other different chapters. So my first thing is posture inspection. So how are you going to examine that? As you can see on the left, each of these has a table of contents. So you can push on any of these and it will take you to that portion of your book. So this is how to evaluate someone from a lateral view. So as you can see, there's photos there. So the students can click on the photo and get a nice big picture of the person looking at posture. There's a verbal description, so it gives the students reminders of what they're supposed to be looking at from a lateral view. There's a clip from a textbook there, so they can look at that, and it gives them more description on how to do this correctly. And then what I was really excited about was my videos. So now what I have done is I have conducted a examination in live format. So now the students can, if during class, if I haven't been able to get over to them, they can click on it and look at it and remind themselves of how to do it. If they're preparing for the practical examination, they can review this as well. If, let's say, a year down the line, they want to remember, how did she teach us to do that again? They can click on it and it's right there. The other thing that's really nice about this is, as you can see, I'm examining my father. And the students are pretty much 25 to 30, and they're all pretty normal, like their body types are pretty normal. And they always say to me, it's challenging to learn how to examine an older person in class. So this allows them to look at me examining someone who does not have perfect posture and does have some postural deviations. So that's a really valuable tool, I think, that this provides. To go out of a chapter, you just 2-finger swipe, and then you can go to other parts of your book, like on the bottom. So let's say I'm doing a cervical spine screen. Another widget I can do is these little gallery where there's photographs of the different techniques that they're doing. I can 2-finger swipe out of that. So let's go to this chapter. So this is my accessory motion chapter. So this is showing them how to look at the accessory motion of the shoulder joint. So let's look at glenohumeral lateral glide. So again, I've got photographs here where they can look at me performing the techniques. There's a description of it, and there's a video. So I just want to show you what one of my videos looks like.
With the elbow on a towel roll,
so the thing
make
that's
contact
really
with
nice
your web
about this
space
is it
over
gives
the
them a
proximal
visual, so they
medial
can look at me
humerus,
doing the
high
technique.
in the
It
axilla.
gives them an auditory,
Your stabilization
so they can
will
listen
be
to
over
me
the
performing the technique.
scapular-clavicular complex.
And also,
your forearm should be
what this
perpendicular
does
to the
is it
humerus
gives,
in the line
they
of
can
force,
choose if they
applying
want
a
to
lateral
have
distraction.
closed captioning on the bottom. So that allows students, if they have accessibility issue, that they can then look at that and see the actual closed captioning on the bottom of the video. So it's really wonderful. So I think you can get an appreciation of how wonderful a tool this will be in our physical therapy curriculum for the students to learn all this very hands-on things that we need to really teach them how to do. When I showed this to my students, they were like coming out of their chairs. They were so excited. And what it has done is over the course of the semester in our labs, many of us are videotaping the techniques as we teach it to the students, and then we're going to incorporate it into an iBook, and then the students will have that. All of our students have iPads. They're all very excited about this initiative. Again, this is a great tool for them. And it's interesting because most PT clinics and hospitals now are using iPads for electronic documentation. So now the student has their class notes with them at all times as they're in the clinic, and they're using their iPads for online documentation anyway. So it's a wonderful tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Well, if Amy's book was a how-to book about how to fix your body, our next book is a how-to book about how to do some amazing stuff with computers. Like professional football or the Bible, it's a team effort coming from Professors Reagan Mass and Sohail Borushaki of the Department of Geography. So, professors, take it away.
Hello, I'm Sohail Borushaki. I'm assistant professor in the Department of Geography, and I'm working with Dr. Reagan Mass to produce an eText to introduce and teach geographical information systems.
So we've created this eText so that essentially we can give them the ability to avoid the typical cookie cutter type manual and use something that's much more interactive, something that they can really engage with at home, practice over and over again with the software so that by the time they come back into the classroom, they can really get to more in-depth type application and practice. We've created this eText so that it contains a lot of really interactive information for students to access all within one container.
Every single chapter has been divided into tutorials and assignments explaining how to use a GIS software in our class. At the end of each chapter, we have assignments for the students using real-world data and scenarios.
This type of review question is very useful because students get instant feedback about their understanding of a particular topic. Another thing that you can do with the text is create an animation and insert it very easily into your text to sort of give extra information about a particular background of that subject and really get students engaged in that particular topic.
We created videos for each step with voiceovers explaining how to use the software. It was an amazing experience for Reagan and I to write this eText exactly the way we wanted it.
All right, our next eText by David Blumenkrantz of the Department of Journalism is not a how-to book. Instead, it's a fascinating, in my opinion, compendium of information about our relationship to mass media. And as you'll see, it's a PDF, but it's not your grandma's PDF, which would have been like the Saturday Evening Post. As you'll see, students who use this book will also use it alongside social media, I believe. So expect some embarrassing pictures of them they'll live to regret. David.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Actually, it is my grandma's PDF. I got it from her. I inherited it. This is a live ebook. I guess the impetus behind doing it was partly to relieve the students of the burden of having to buy the expensive book that we've been using for the past 10 years or 9 years that I've been teaching the class. And successfully, I was able to do that. They don't have to buy the book now. I'm providing this to them for free, so of course they're happy about that. But more, beyond that, much more importantly, I suppose, is the content of it. And as you can see here, the concept of having a live book that I kind of wanted to come up with was something that could be constantly shifting and changing according to current events as they occur, because the class of visual communication deals with the mass media, things that are in all aspects of the mass media, from photography and film and television and advertising and political cartooning and just basically everything. So in this book, you'll see here that I ended up with 450 pages, which probably sounds a lot more impressive than it is because they're actually slides as if they were like PowerPoint or keynote slides, but still 450 pages featuring over 220 links in the latest manifestation of the book, because I have updated it twice or 3 times since the semester began already, things that have come up. And you can see that they have access now through the live links. These are all things that supplement the images that are in the text and the writing that's in the text. Access for them to go to academic institutions and research by academics in all kinds of higher learning institutions, journalistic organizations, of course, museums, NGOs, podcasts, blogs, PDF documents, you name it. If it's out there in the media and it's something that I feel that will help the students to better understand the the curriculum. I'm going to put it in there, and I guess I have to say that to this point, I'm going to just go in there like this, and I'm going to go like this. Yes. So far to this point, it seems like it's been very popular with the students. They seem to really like it. Oopsie, hold on a second. This is bound to happen. Okay, here we go. All right. So this is what probably a typical page from the book, in that it has a combination of text, some images, and this particular page has 3 links. Some pages have no links. Some pages have 2, 3, 4, even 5 links. And the links might be something that, for example, goes back to a story in the press that gives them a lot more depth and detail about a particular topic that we're discussing in class. Or perhaps it might be something more like a humorous video that sort of adds another context to the story that we're discussing. Very funny. He's come up with the Pulitzer app so that any photograph can be made into a Pulitzer quality. Absolutely brilliant. The students love it. The students identify with that kind of stuff. So I try to keep a mixture of, there's a lot of heavy material in journalism, as you can imagine, a lot of very serious kind of issues that are covered. So try to mix it up with some lighter stuff that the college-age students can relate to. So how the book works, basically on every page in the book, there's an arrow that goes back to a topic page for that chapter. So each chapter is loaded with topics. The topics last maybe 1 to 2 or 3 pages. Pick one at random here. Let's just go to something that's not too scary. Yeah, a concept like a concept like the myth of photographic truth. There's that's a topic that we cover in the class. Go back to there, and on every topics page, it leads us back to the main contents page, and that's where all the action is. From there, you can go anywhere in the book, and so the book is basically divided into 3 sections. We have the section on perception. One of the great benefits of being able to do this book was that I was able to take my experience of teaching this class for, like I said, for 9 years, and knowing the things that were resonating with the students and knowing the things that they were kind of rolling their eyes at or just not really paying that much attention to, I was able to focus more on the things that I felt that resonated and that were more significant, and eliminate the fat, so to speak, and come up with a series of topics that I feel are the most important for them to know. So basically that's it. And at the end of at any given chapter, there is a activities and quiz page, and this is the sort of the ebook format that takes them in. For example, takes them into Moodle. There's a quiz at the end of each chapter, which is in Moodle as it always was. It's a multiple choice or a different format quiz, and so they'll just tap on that link up there where it says Moodle quiz, and it'll take them right into Moodle. And if they're signed in, they don't have to sign in. If they're not signed in, it'll ask them to sign in. I have some social media projects that we're doing in the class. One of them using the site Pinterest, where they catalog visual examples of concepts that are in the class, and some of that work we do in the class together, so we have more interaction between the students in sort of groups and pairs. And the other project is a blog that they're keeping, which is a similar kind of a project, but they're working in pairs, and they work out of class and in class, again, to illustrate and elaborate on the many topics that are in the class. So it's a lot of fun. I think the students are really enjoying it. I love using it, seriously. I find that I'm using it in all my classes because I teach the photography classes, and I have some good stuff in here on photographic ethics and things of that nature, and something will come up in class, and now I have everything right at my fingertips. Whereas before I might say, well, I have something on that, let me see if I can find it for you. Now this is like all my curriculum bundled into one massive document, and yeah, I like it. And it's fun because I was able to put all the things that I like, Peanuts, Charlie Brown, television shows, pop cultural things, and again, like a lot of the more serious, hardcore journalistic topics. So time's up. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, David. Our next presentation is a video from Elizabeth Martinez, again, of the Department of Journalism. Her eText, Surfaces, is like the Strunk and White for the digital age, or if you're too young for that reference, it's like Celebrity Rehab, but for writing and fewer celebrities die. The point is, it's a book about how to write a book like itself. It's a sort of digital M.C. Escher painting. So without further ado, Elizabeth Martinez.
I'm Elizabeth E. Martinez. I'm Assistant Professor of Journalism, and I wrote a digital book called Surfaces: How to Write Clean Text for Multimedia Publication. The book is original text and original photographs. It uses the template of iBooks to create a multimedia publication. I wanted to do more than grammar exercises. I wanted to give the students a motivation. At the end of every moment or chapter, there's a set of interactive exercises that the students can use to test their knowledge, including drag and drop, or there's multiple choice questions where they could pick and check their answer to see if they got it correct. Another interactive element in the book is the picture gallery. The question of the gallery is to ask whether pictures are always a better communication tool than words. My goal is to use this picture gallery during class time to open it up for student discussion. In addition to the interactive photo galleries, I use the interactive photo gallery tool to actually create a timeline of various important texts throughout the history of mankind. Early Disc of Symbols in Greece, the Egyptian Book of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and so forth. My hope is that students will learn how text, photographs, and other interactive elements work together in a digital book, and that they can use the book as an example of something they too can create for themselves and for their own audiences.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, our final presentation is from Tim Carrolls of the Department of Biology. Now, one of the distinctive features of his text is that it makes use of widgets. Now, in my day, they referred to just any anonymous product, but apparently nowadays it's got a much more precise meaning, which is that there's some kind of electronic doodad. All right, Tim, take it away.
Thanks, Rob. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to show you my digital textbook that I created in iBooks Author, which is Apple's tool for creating some of the textbooks which you've already seen. And this started out as a 300-page Word document, not very engaging, and I used it for a couple of years. And then when iBooks Author came out, I thought, I need to do that. That looks way better than what I had previously. So with that, I'll just launch into my textbook and show you some of the features that it offers. This textbook is to accompany a 3-hour per week lab, and this is mostly computer modeling in wildlife ecology. And the students will be modeling or doing their models in Microsoft Excel. So the first 3 chapters of this textbook are largely based on learning how to use Excel, which the students have a very vague sort of skill in using it. But this teaches them the more advanced features. So I'm just going to go through the first 3 chapters because I want to get to some of the more interesting ones where we actually start learning a little bit about biology. And so I'm just going to swipe to the left here. We're advancing through the different chapters. And I'll get to chapter 4, which is the sort of first biology chapter, density-dependent population growth. And I'll just launch into the first page, which is the thumbnails you see at the bottom of the screen. And so the students, this is a typical chapter where the students will be reading through the background and the theory behind the topic, in this case, density-independent population growth. And so the students will be reading through the chapter. Ideally, they would be reading through this portion of the chapter before they come to the class, because this is an in-class exercise. And right now, it doesn't look much different than a typical PDF. And we'll get through some scary math. Not that scary, but... And eventually, we'll get to some of the more unique features of iBooks that allows the students to be a little more engaged with what they're reading. In this case, there are several widgets, as Rob already mentioned. These are electronic doodads. And the first doodad I'll show you is the calculator, which looks like a calculator there. The students are asked the question, how long will it take a population to double given a certain growth rate? And so the students can just select, they click on that calculator, and they've already read about the math, and then they can calculate their answer, and they want to check their answer. Well, the little blue icon on the top left, which looks like a little eye, if I press that, then they can get the answer in this what's called a popover widget in this case. And then also on this, this page is another widget. This is a widget that is linked directly to YouTube, and it shows a YouTube video on the problems with exponential growth in pigs in Texas. And the students can watch that video without all of this, without actually leaving the textbook. So it's watching a YouTube video without actually going to YouTube. They're actually watching this embedded. And so the students will continue to work through this chapter or read through this chapter, and eventually when they come to class they'll start with this section here, the procedure, and this is where they'll be working on another computer, working with Excel, but having their iPad with them as an electronic tutorial to help them work through these problems in population modeling. In this case, the students are walked through a series of step-by-step procedures, and they're told what they need to be doing, not everything they need to be doing. They do have to be thinking about what they're doing, and so they're converting mathematical formulas into Excel equations. And so the first step in this is enter a formula for births and deaths, and they have to think about this, but if they don't know the exact way to do this, they hit this little blue popover button again, and there's the precise instructions for doing this. Now ideally they would never need to do that, they should know that, but the first time they may need to check some of these popovers. So they can work through these exercises and create their population models, and then when they're done, there'll be a series of questions at the end that they can answer. This is another widget that they can answer some questions, and which you can arrange to have those answers sent directly to you if you wish. Now I'm just going to jump to another chapter just to show you some other animations. And so this one is, I'm going to jump to a specific page here. And actually this one was in the video, but this is another widget. This is actually more of an animation type widget. The students, this is using matrix algebra to calculate population growth rate. And so the students will require to convert what's a life cycle diagram of birth, death, and population size and put that in mathematical notation. And so this animation just shows, well, where do you put fertility rates in the matrix, and where do you put death rates as well. And this widget, I didn't have to know any animation technique to create this. This was created in Apple's Keynote presentation software, and that can be embedded into the iBook as a widget. And then after that, so once the students have done that, and they now know how to calculate a matrix, they can test their knowledge with this type of interaction. This was a little more, or this widget was a little more complicated to make, but this one sets up where they're given a scenario, and they're supposed to select by touching the cell where where they should be entering a certain value. And they can click on one, and if they get it wrong, they get an X, and if they get it right, they can get a check mark, and then they can advance on to the next question. Well, that's most of the sort of functions, and there's many more different types of widgets you can incorporate in these iBooks. But I just like to stress that even though this looks technically daunting, it's actually not as difficult as it appears. If you're comfortable with working with PowerPoint or Apple's Keynote software, you could make a pretty excellent iBook without too much of a challenge. And fortunately, we have some great resources here in the Faculty Technology Center to help you get through some of those points where you do end up at a sort of technological barrier. And so this is not as difficult as you think. It does take time, but I'm sure it'll be worth it in the end. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Well, now it's the portion of our showcase where we do a Q&A, and leading the Q&A will be our fearless and amazing leader of the eText project, Paul Wilson. So, Paul? And oh, yeah, you guys go over here.
Okay, so same deal. Raise your hand. I'll scurry over and present the microphone to you. If it's about this far away from your mouth, that's good. It's about the size of your hand. Yep. See, I can scurry.
Impressive scurrying. Okay, my question is for anyone who used images that weren't your own. How easy or difficult was it to get permission to use those images in your eTexts?
I think I should probably answer that because that's probably the biggest preoccupation I have with the entire project is the copyright issues. In the course like visual communication, the very nature of the course requires an abundance of examples from all sources of media, and I think that's one of the reasons why the textbook that I've been using was $200. So the only way I've gotten around it so far is to use as many of my own photographs as I can, but of course I'm not a political cartoonist or a filmmaker, and I can't create examples for everything. So I've had to just go ahead and use things, and I'm under the very generous blanket of umbrella of fair use and not charge anything for the book at this point. And I am looking into, I have put queries out to some ebook publishers to see how we can get around this and see what kind of modifications might be able to be made, but I have to cross my fingers and hope that fair use serves us well in this project so far.
Yeah, so far I've only been using my own photographs at this point in my textbook because I've been trying to be very careful as to the problems with copyrights. But I can, like David just mentioned, you can search for images that can be used under fair use and those that are sort of openly available to avoid those problems.
Yes, there is WikiCommons, which does allow you to use certain types of things for without copyright constraints.
I wondered for Amy, how did you make and edit your videos, and was that challenging? I know you said you had others working with you, but if you're not proficient at those things, I wondered if that was a challenge for you.
The iPad making a video is really very easy, just to record it right there. If you need to edit it, that becomes a little bit more of an issue. I just pretty much just started and stopped. So it was very easy. But the people in the technology division, I will say, they helped me with the closed captioning and that aspects of it, and they were very helpful and very willing to help. So it was actually very easy.
How's it going? My question is also for Amy. When you assign readings, which are not just readings anymore, they're also watching videos and things like that. You said you had classes of about 35. Do you find yourself having more available time to work with students because you are able to have videos and different things when you assign readings?
Yeah, I think it allows me to have more class discussion and about things that, instead of just spending all your time doing, the students can spend more time on their own because now they have it in front of them, and then we can spend more time synthesizing in class. And it becomes more of a group dynamic. It really makes it a lot better because yes, you can have discussions and pull it all together easier with them now because you have more time to do so.
I just want to mention that in terms of getting access to photographs and images and other kinds of copyrighted information, that the library has a number of databases that you can use to gain access to different photographs to use in your iBooks. So some of these have stricter copyright provisions than others, but you may want to look into what the library has to offer.
And I just want to say for my videos and my photographs where I'm using the students, I just had the students sign that they gave me permission to be videotaped in class.
I'm wondering how much time went into building these beautiful books.
They will take as much time as you as you have. Can't say for certain because everybody's book is different and will incorporate different types of, if you want to put more interaction elements into it, that'll take more time. My book has a lot of math notation. That took a lot of time to get that into the right format. But if you're starting from something that is already printed, so you already have a digital text or PDF that you're working with, it wouldn't actually take it that much just to get it into the basic iBook format.
I have to be honest, just my one book, I bet took me 60, 70, 80 hours probably. And there's a real learning curve because first of all, you have to know how to use a Macintosh to be able to create an iBook if that's what you're choosing. I hadn't even really knew how to use a Macintosh. So that took a little bit of time. And then just learning the format of an iBook took some time. And record videos, etc. But now that I have the format, every book from here on out is going to be a lot quicker, because then you can just use that same format and just insert your new material.
She has to make a book for each joint.
Yeah.
I was wondering, for anyone that uses YouTube videos, I use a lot of hip-hop videos and things in my classes. Has anyone had to deal with broken links in their ebooks?
Yeah, occasionally a student will notify me that a particular link is not working, and it could be something that has nothing to do with the technology that we're using. It could be the website itself, and you have to go in there and either find a new link or re-link it. Happens sometimes. It's one of the pitfalls.
I think that's one of the nice things about an ebook too, is that it can be something you can change continuously. So as your material changes, as you find new things, you just continually evolve your book every year, and it's easy.
So Harry'd like to know how this changes your view of teaching as a group. You somewhere around here.
Well, for myself, it's definitely, I think somebody put up a slide in the first part of the presentation today where they talked about how it was 15 weeks of straight talking out to the students and then some traditional assessment formats. I also feel that my visual communication class was getting fairly stale in that respect, and this is a lot more discussion oriented now. They're required to look at whatever topics and chapters in advance of the class and actually do the quiz in advance of the class, so we can just sort of talk about the examples that they've chosen, the things that they find interesting. So there's a lot more discussion, and I find that to be, I think time moves along well in the class, and the students really seem to be more engaged in general because they're interested in what each other has to say, more so than just listening to an instructor, of course.
I think my students, I said, are so excited about it because it gives them something that they can use really forever, honestly. And it allows me to not spend so much time, because there's only one of me. There's only one of me, and sometimes I just feel like I can't get around and help them as much as I can, and I'm spending all this extra time coming in on my own time to help them with things, and this way it can put more on them, that they have the material and they can use it, and it just makes my class work so much easier.
I think with the interactive textbooks, there's the opportunity for students to self-assess their understanding, which is hard to do with a sort of typical PDF or physical textbook. So those types of elements, I think, really help a student as they're working through some difficult concepts to sort of gauge their understanding step by step as they go through, rather than just at the end or on an exam, let's say.
I think it's also important to address the issue of technology, because somebody asked a question earlier today, when the instructor himself hits the wall and doesn't know how to do something, and some of the students are a lot more tech savvy these days. And I teach the class in an iPad format and also in a regular format. So in the iPad class, it's happened a few times already where an app wouldn't load, or everybody couldn't log on at the same time, or they couldn't create a bookmark or something like that. And I'm sort of trying to create a little, like an IT app, Genius Bar kind of a group of students that can help each other, and they enjoy doing that as well. So that makes it more interesting.
Hello, and thank you for such great information. For the iBooks, if they're not accessible through other non-iPad tablets, what are the alternatives for both students accessing them and professors creating on non-Mac software?
Well, at this point, iBook Author is only available on the Mac and will only produce iBooks to be used on iPads and sometime this fall to be used on Macintosh computers. But at this point, you can't really port the interactive elements from an iBook to any other platform, such as Android tablets or PCs. It can export as a PDF, but then you lose all of the interesting things that make it an iBook. So at this time, it's only available on an iPad. Now, in our biology program, that works because we have the iPad initiative in all of our core classes and our intro biology courses, so that by the time they get to my 400 level class, everyone has an iPad. So that was sort of what I needed to do before I would embark on creating an iBook, was I needed to know that students would have that, at least every student would have access to the same text or same technology.
And I don't know if I was clear about it, but my book is actually a large PDF file. And then we talked about how much time it took to prepare it. I actually started out with a series of my old PowerPoints and converted them first to Keynote, and then from there to a PDF, so that links would be live. You have to do that through Keynote. So yeah, as a PDF, it can be used on any computer, any device. I have students looking at it on an iPhone, on a tablet, on a laptop, and so on.
Okay, I think I'll cut off questions there and let Rob tell another joke or something like that.
Well, the showcase is over, my part anyway, so I have no more jokes to tell. The hat's off, the suit jacket's open, you can see my great tie. It's Thomas Pink. It's not as good as these books, but it's still pretty cool. I got it at a wedding. Anyway, there's one last part, which is Dion Zell is going to close things out. So, bye, everybody.
Absolutely, and thank you, Rob. Boy, how can I follow that? It's like... So there you have it. I don't know about you, I work with this stuff every day, and I'm still impressed. So I'm just rather blown away by what our faculty can produce, and it's been a real privilege to work with them. So I really want a heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you who's put in the time and effort to produce these masterpieces. So yes, they are, well, would you like to clap one more round? Sure. Why not? And I think what's really profound here is that, yes, these are pioneers, but the paths that they are blazing can now be followed by all faculty. Because I think, as you've seen today, this is within everybody's realm and reach to use these technologies. So there's no reason not every one of you can start to do this tomorrow. So I'd like to just express a few thanks to some individuals and to some divisions and departments across campus without whom none of this would have been possible. Really want to extend a heartfelt thanks to Hillary Kaplowitz, who is our Course Redesign leader. Stand up, Hillary. As well as to Paul Wilson, who deserves accolades. So these two spend hours coaching and helping faculty bring their projects to fruition. So I really appreciate that. Also, all of our FTC staff who did amazing behind-the-scenes work. You all know who you are, so thank you to all of you out there. And more broadly, I'd also like to thank Academic Affairs and Information Technology for funding and supporting the faculty work. So couldn't have been done without that. Faculty development for making sure that these projects are both pedagogically and technologically enriched. Disability Resources and Educational Services, or DRES, and the National Center on Deafness and Universal Design for making sure that these projects are accessible to all learners. Thank you. To the Tseng College, who presented at our institute and provided invaluable information about online instruction, since that's their specialty. And of course to the library for helping us figure out these thorny issues of access and copyright, and of course for the use of this room. So thank you, Mark. And if I've forgotten anyone, I sincerely apologize, but thank you anyway. So finally, what's next? Well, you know, it feels like we're just getting started, in all honesty. Stay tuned, because later this semester we'll be announcing the 2014 version of the Course Redesign Institute and the eText initiative, so keep a lookout for those. I hope you'll all apply, by the way. And in the meantime, you can learn about these and many other technologies by coming down to the Faculty Technology Center. There you have our information. And actually, on the back of your program, there's a workshop schedule which shows all the workshops that are available for the entire semester. So these are ongoing. Come on down anytime. They're easy to sign up for and take. And with that, does anyone have any closing comments? No? Then I think we're there. So thank you again very much for coming.